Planning Commission meeting on January the 14th. And let's start a meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Jennifer, can you do the roll call, please?
Yep. Chair Eric Sneff,
Here.
Vice Chair Benz,
Here.
Secretary Lundy, here. Linda Garrick, here. Jenny Eller,
Perfect.
Mark Smith, absent. Joel King.
Excused.
Here,
All right. Do we have any announcements, correspondence? That
Just the
yours?
correspondent that Mark Smith is absent with excuse.
Okay. Next is the approval of the agenda. Everybody had a chance to look at it. Need a motion to accept it?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I second it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. Okay. Agenda is approved. Next is the approval of the September 10th meeting, last meeting we had. Everybody had a chance to go look through this? Any additions,
No.
deletions, revisions? Okay, I'm going to take the opportunity just to kind of go through a couple of things that were said in there and make sure. And that's item number 2, under the ordinance updates. You know, we're going to continue on the local ordinance on the solar energy, and I think the planner's going to talk about this. Is that right, Justin?
Correct.
Okay, because we're committed now for several meetings as to doing something on this. From what I understand in the minutes, there is 4 options that we can go on. And it's just kind of a little bit of a recall what we talked about.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I don't want to dive wholly into my information.
Yeah, not yet.
But what I can say is that my position has changed since that last discussion as a result of actions that have occurred. So you are correct that the minutes reflect what our discussion was and my position at the time. I look forward to having a discussion with you tonight about how my position has changed.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, with that, have a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Also move.
Second it.
Let's do a roll call on this, please. Jennifer?
Joel King,
Aye.
Jenny Eller,
Aye.
Linda Garrick,
Yes.
Secretary Lundy, yes. Vice Chair Benz,
Yes.
Chair Eric Sneff.
Correct. Yes. All right. Next item is the ordinance updates. And the first one is the 2A. The PUD is open space. Is this something you can talk to, Justin?
So I have two areas that I'd like you to reflect on. So first, I will state that I am comfortable with the removal of the PUD chapter if the Planning Commission would like to have a public hearing on that. While the Zoning Enabling Act does provide for the establishment of a PUD and the use of a PUD as a tool by a municipality, it's not a requirement. So I would be fine holding a public hearing and leaving that decision to the Planning Commission as a recommendation, as well as a final approval by the Township Board, with the only asterisk being that if the township's legal counsel were to somehow stop the process or halt the process for a specific reason, then I would always defer to it. But I am confident or comfortable that you could remove that provision of the ordinance.
Okay, so the next step would be that we set up a public hearing?
You would hold a public hearing, but hold on conversely to that, because under item A, we say PUD delete open space, which ties into item B, community wastewater utility systems. Again, I am comfortable with the proposed language in your packet with regard to the proposed wastewater amendment that has the effect of essentially disallowing future private systems. Again, there are a number of things that sort of control that. One, that the township has the ability to determine that. The township also has the ability to assert the right to not allow significant developments without access to public sewer. Not by statute have to require the allowance of private sewer systems. Number three, that there are policies that are in place at both the state of Michigan as well as the Oakland County Health Department that provide a specific requirement in order to be able to receive a private system. And therefore, again, I am comfortable with the language that is here as presented with again, the simple asterisk of if our township attorney was able to provide statutory evidence that says that we do not have that authority. I don't see it. I have not found it, and therefore I'm comfortable with it. And however, as it relates to the adoption of that after a public hearing and recommendation, what I really need an opinion on from the township attorney is the proposed amendments to the open space ordinance, because again, with its references to two acts, specifically the Zoning Enabling Act as well as the Open Space Preservation Act, I want to ensure that what we are proposing in these amendments are not in conflict of either those two acts, 177 of 2001 and the Zoning Enabling Act, that there is no conflict between those two, and furthermore, that there are no other state acts that would prohibit the limits within the act or within the amendment that are being proposed, such as the striking of the R1 residential, the discussion of the parcel sizes, and then the implications of the amendments to the community wastewater systems. If our township attorney greenlights this, then I am again 100% behind the amendment and comfortable with the language as presented.
Okay, when we talk about a public hearing, do I understand it that we combine these two items, A and B, to talk about it in that public hearing?
I would be comfortable scheduling a public hearing with regard to the removal of the PUD ordinance. While I'm comfortable with the language of the community wastewater utility systems and the item B, I believe there is a correlation between item B and the second part of item A, which is the open space piece.
Okay, okay.
If the attorney can weigh in and clearly assure us that that correlation is reasonable, however, there is no conflict with other state acts that I'm not aware of, then I am A-okay submitting those three items under a or requesting to schedule a public hearing for the consideration of those items.
Okay. Justin, if we could kind of divert here a little bit here, what we discussed here, also, we need some input from the board before we go into the next subject on these two, everybody had a chance to review
Yes.
on this. Any comments?
I'm just wondering, are we, is the action to request attorney legal review on these items prior to scheduling a public hearing, or is it scheduling a,
That's what I was gonna ask.
I would, in my mind, if you are able to ask for a public hearing conditioned upon attorney approval, that allows you to keep the process moving, but gives you time before the required publishing date to get a response back to the clerk or the board as to okay or no, we have to fix some things. That way, if you at least move that forward, you can always not publish and pull back. But if we had to wait another 7 to 10 days, then we're going to push ourselves outside of our window to publish if we were looking to do this at the next month's meeting. And I would ask if the clerk agrees or does she have another consideration?
Bob has yet to see these. I only wanted Bob to review these one time and save his time and the township funds. So what I'm really after is to make sure that the planning commission, as you noted, you're fine with all the words. We try to insert what changes the planning commission suggested in the past. And then if there's no other changes, please authorize us to give this to our attorney so that he can do a full review. And then he is probably going to make changes. I don't foresee him having this done, especially with the stash we're going to give him. That's going to meet the requirements for publication by next month. But if you guys are satisfied with the words and whatever words he comes up with, then yes, you can say that once it's ready, schedule for public hearing. But I do want the PC to know that he has yet to review these and that he's going to have to take his time and make sure that we're in compliance.
so basically, we need to look at these and see if we like it. If there's any changes that we want, then it goes to the attorney, then it comes back to us again before we schedule a hearing.
If
Is
you
that
want it to
correct?
come back to you again. If you guys are fine with whatever Bob's input is, we can do that. Or if you want to see it first, we can bring it back to you first.
I think it should come back, that's just my thoughts.
Okay.
Okay.
Final draft before we schedule.
Okay. Is there anything right now that should change that anybody has any input on?
So we're keeping the open space portion, but we're saying eliminate the PUD.
Open
that-
space is mandated by the state.
Right.
The PUD is optional.
I was a little confused when I was reading the board package because they're both part of 2A.
Yep.
They
me too.
almost, they're not duplicative, but the open space is kind of saying we want to reserve space. Similar to the PUD was always you're going to reserve open space as well. So it's almost like having two. The PUD, of course, goes on even further and allows many
Yeah.
more things in the open space. So the board, when we talked about it, said, yeah, let's do the open space and get rid of the PUD.
Okay.
And I would reassure and reaffirm that under the zoning enabling acts, those two are not connected. Where I was most concerned for the purpose of getting the township attorney's thoughts is the fact that the ordinance itself references two different acts. Well, at least it references the Open Space Act. I wanted to make sure if we keep it that it also references the zoning enabling act. But I want to make sure that there are no conflicts with the changes that we're proposing with either those two acts or any other acts that may impact open space preservation, preservation of farmland, farmland transfer of development rights, PA 116, farmland trusts. I want to make sure that we've covered the legal basis, that there's not either case law outside of the statutes that exist, or otherwise that may impact the language that's presented as you are reading it.
Okay, all right, thanks, Justin. All right, let's move on to the next item, C, 2C.
Pocket
Would be
parks.
2B.
2C.
So is there any action we need to take on 2B to recommend that it goes to the attorney?
I think that's the next step that,
2A. I'm sorry. 2A and 2B is a recommendation for attorney review at this point?
yeah, I think, Justin, what you said is the statutory evidence is the question on 2B, is that correct?
Not necessarily statutory evidence, but verification that there are no statutory or case law conflicts
Okay,
with the language as presented.
okay, so I think the answer is yes.
So we are making a motion to recommend this to the attorney for review?
Okay, you want, okay,
I'll
let's make that a motion. Okay, you're making that motion?
Are we doing 2A and 2B? Or are we
Yes.
doing, okay.
To be or not to be.
Discussion on 2A or 2B that we needed to do?
Not,
Is everyone good with it?
yeah, I think we're good
I'm
at this
good.
point, yeah, so, yeah, we're ready for the motion which you made, right?
I'll second.
Okay, Jennifer, second. Roll call on that, please.
Joel King,
Here, aye.
Jenny Allard. Yes. Linda Garrett. Yes. Secretary Lundy. Yes. Vice Chair Benz.
Yes.
Chair Eric Sepp.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. All right, now we can go to 2C, pocket parks. And I think the only thing that was in question there was the property size across the street that we're talking about.
So the ordinance is presented before you, makes two specifications. One, pocket parks of private ownership, requires a site plan review, that it would be included with a development plan, that it demonstrates safety and environmental concerns and a low impact use as defined by the ordinance. And that the planning commission will review that size and use in relation to the pocket, to the development. Similarly, for publicly owned parks, it states that the township board shall determine the park size to the proposed use, as well as the immediate area for low density use. But I think we might want that to read low impact use instead of low density, possibly, and then also the matter of time of closing. When we spoke about this previously, we had asked, I had asked, and I believe the board had asked, for a recommendation on a specific size, whether it's 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, 4 acres, 5 acres. But I think the language here leaves that up to interpretation, as long as that interpretation meets the intent of the definition of the ordinance. So, if clerk has any additional comments to add to that, again, with some clarity here, I think I'm good with the language as it's existing, but I think it's important that the planning commission weigh in on that and provide some definitive guidance as to not only the first paragraph definition, but also the way that both public and private parks are considered.
Right, so in that first paragraph, the only reference we make on size is small. All right, any input from the board as to,
I agree that in Article 4, where in paragraph 1, we talk about low impact use. In paragraph 3, we talk about low density use. I agree that low impact is probably the appropriate language for paragraph 3.
I just wanted to clarify there because if the intent is to say low impact use in low density areas, then that is a perfectly legitimate purpose. But I wanted to make sure that that was the intent of the language as it's presented.
May I ask something though?
If the intent is for that wording to say low intensity, or low impact is in paragraph 2, then that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that was the intent as opposed to saying low impact and low density areas.
In the definition, it actually says low impact use and low density use. I'm almost wondering if those two terms should be carried over both in paragraph 2 and 3. So it matches the definition.
If that's the case, then I would recommend in the first paragraph that we change the terminology of low density use to low density zoning districts. So
Low density what?
Zoning.
No, that wasn't the intent. That's not the intent to go to low density because a pocket park is usually within a subdivision or a central area. So the intent, I think, was low density, meaning that it's not going to be attracting a lot of residents. Low impact would mean that it's not.
The area that I would be concerned about is the term low density, as Charlie here wants to say low density use. The term low density, if it were in my mind to be presented to for a formal legal opinion or appeal, low density itself is not a use. However, we do have districts where density is limited, and so that would be my biggest concern about the terminology, is recognizing that low impact, minimal impact is the outcome we're striving for. However, I think somebody that wanted to challenge that could come back and say, well, low density by itself is not a use. It's a condition. It's a limitation of use.
Would minimal use work?
Did you hear it?
Low impact,
Minimal use.
yeah.
And minimal use?
Are they not saying the same thing? I mean, isn't it similar, or can we just leave it at low impact use?
Well, low impact in my mind, and I think Bob's gonna probably come up with the words. Low impact on my mind would be like the nature park, very low impact, whereas minimal use. So we have crowds coming out to the pickleball courts. I mean, just crowds. Well, you don't want a pocket park drawing crowds to it, so you do want minimal use, or just for like the surrounding area. So maybe Bob's gonna have to come up with the wording of the two things we were trying to accomplish, because I'm just drawing a blank.
Should we make a recommendation that the attorney look at this, and come up with the language that we're looking for low impact, low
And use.
density use, minimal use, and, come up with the correct language?
Yeah, I can see where you're going, not to put density, but yeah, I like let him figure it out.
I just think I think that would be important because the purpose of this article is to recognize that there is a public benefit to having a public or private recreation within the community, but at the same time, it has to be low impact. It needs to be not a burden on our public services, not a burden on the individuals and the residences that are residing in the vicinity I just did, for me, because we always have our performance standards and our noise ordinances to fall back on. But I don't like the term low density use, for the fact that if there was an interpretation, of low density, it could quickly be interpreted as, well, low density is not a use at all. It is a limited, restricted, outcome of the ordinance based on our zoning classifications in our districts, but I think it opens the door for a challenge.
Okay. So, Linda, are you saying that we will make a motion to have this looked at by legal?
Yeah, but I think we need to decide about time. It says all pocket parks must close no later than 9 PM or 10 PM.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was gonna bring up.
Should that be something more like dawn to dusk, or is that consistent with our other parks?
That's what I wrote on here too.
So is that,
Okay, so a condition, make an outline what the legal review is gonna be. One on the density, the other is on the timing, that it's
well, I
open.
think timing is up to us, but
Yeah.
I think the language,
Yeah,
I would think would be something that the attorney could refine, knowing what we're looking for with this.
okay.
The parks are like from dawn to dusk.
I would keep the time consistent with the public parks, that are not considered pocket parks. Otherwise, like I said, you could fall back on your performance standards, your noise ordinances, your nuisance ordinances. But I think you want to keep it consistent with the existing policies, if those policies are in place.
Is that what we currently have, is dawn to dusk on our other parks?
I'd have to check. I think we might, the reason why I threw this in there, because some of these could be private ownership. So do we want to identify that? But I'm fine, because I'll put in,
It gets confusing.
Yes.
We were looking for any enforcement. I don't know how we would enforce a pocket park with private ownership anyway,
but dawn to dusk is easy, and then it takes into effect the winter and the summer.
I
So
think watersheds.
dawn to dusk.
I know it is. So that would be my suggestion, is the dawn to dusk. And then,
And if you keep it consistent with existing policies, again, I think even if it is under private ownership, let's say within a homeowners association, the homeowners bylaws and master deeds still do not preclude local zoning. So if you keep it consistent, at least you're saying that, look, we're enforcing it equally, whether it's in public or private ownership. That does not matter. And like I said, you also have your nuisance laws, your performance standards, your noise ordinances, that if a private park were to create a nuisance, then you could go through, you can enforce based on it. The HOA and bylaws will not supersede the township zone.
Chair?
Yeah.
Again, this ordinance would be reflective of private and public, so I don't think having anything different in here would make sense. We should match what we have with the other ones. Should be the same for both.
Okay. Are we ready for,
Well, I would like to resolve this issue with low density. I don't understand what that means. That was why I said we should.
we're sending that to legal,
yeah, that's going.
so that he can come up with the language and it will come back to you.
Well, what do we, sure, I understand that. I just don't understand.
So low
I
im-
understand what low impact is. I don't
Okay.
understand what low density is.
So that you're not drawing a lot of crowd. So it's more like a residential park where you're not drawing a huge gathering. It's not gonna be, it's gonna be a quiet park.
But if it wasn't quiet, it would not be low impact. So what are we achieving with low density?
Well, they could have
Impact
functions,
is not.
they could have functions at the Lake George Park. It is definitely low impact, but there has been events at the Lake George Park. So a pocket park would be slightly different. But this is up to you guys. I'm just kind of giving you food for thought, and you pick up where you're going. So it's a pocket park, is it for the immediate area, is more or less in the definition, it's for the area? So the low density was trying to bring that in as well.
Can we talk about an example, like the property across the street, if that was a pocket park? What would you like to see? What wouldn't you like to see?
Right, so
You know, and
that-
how would you classify that?
Right, so it would be like nature trails and a gazebo or a picnic table or a couple of benches in a small area, just a place where people could go and, you know,
Limited
I would see
parking.
that as a low impact.
right.
You know, it's not a pickleball court, it's not lights.
low density. Well, I would be afraid too.
Just let Bob work on it, don't get hung up on this.
Classification.
Yeah, all right, no, you got some good input there, Joel, with it. Do you feel comfortable going to?
Yeah, I mean, he might turn around and call Pauline and say, what are we trying to say with low density, but
He might just cross it right out.
he might
See,
just
you
cross it right out. Yeah,
don't
but
need
sure,
it.
let's go ahead and throw it over the fence and see what he says.
Is that your
Over,
motion?
over the pickleball net.
Is that
Yeah.
the motion? Yeah?
Yeah, I move that we, forward, item 2C to the township attorney, for opinion and language.
Okay, we have a second?
A second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Chair Turksnell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Benz,
Yes.
Secretary Lundy. Yes. Linda Garrett. Yes. Jenny Eller. Yes. Joel King.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right, moving right along, we're into the next items, Justin, you're gonna talk about, right? Renewable energy, like you mentioned earlier.
Let me, sorry, I'm going back to the top of my words. Yes, so renewable energy, large and small scale. I'm gonna be short and brief real quick. So item E, short-term rentals. The bill that was proposed to, provide guidance on short-term rentals and improve the scenario for communities to not exclude them, but regulate them as well as set the number of licenses to provide for them. That bill and that package of bills died in lame duck. That is off the table, at least as it was presented. And now that we have a new congressional, our new Congress and the state House, comprised of one party as well as a Senate comprised of another party, as well as a governor matching the Senate's party. I don't know what the status of short-term rentals or when that bill may come back. However, there was a Supreme Court case to the state of Michigan last late summer, early fall. The case was Desmond versus the Charter Township of Bloomfield Hills, where the Supreme Court upheld that if a use is not specifically mentioned in your ordinance, it is expressly prohibited. Therefore, I don't believe that we need to enact a short-term rental ordinance at this time as a result of that upholding of that Supreme Court opinion, as well as the fact that you already allow for short-term rentals through special land use by way of bed and breakfast.
By way of what?
Bed and breakfast.
Bed and breakfast.
Okay.
Therefore, with the Supreme Court ruling and the death of the bill package, I believe we can at this point hold firm unless a new round of bills are introduced sometime during this next legislative session. However, I find it very hard to believe, in my professional opinion, as a planner of 22 years of experience, as well as my last 8 years on a law committee for planners, that there will ever be consensus between the current House and the current Senate as to how to regulate special short-term rentals.
Okay.
Unless a lawsuit Michigan Court of Appeals provides a separate ruling that's a published opinion that requires us to do something, I don't believe we need to at this point. I believe we're covered.
Okay. All
So
right.
going back now to item D, renewable energy, and coming back to my initial comments at our September meeting, I had a position that there were sort of four options to move forward with the impending enactment of Public Act 233 and subsequent Public Act 234, whereas 233 provided the process of which siting of alternative energy projects that met a specific capacity of power generation were to be reviewed and cited, as well as define what was considered a compatible renewable energy ordinance to be adopted by a local effective unit of government, as well as the only items that could be considered to be reviewed in order to be considered a compatible renewable energy ordinance. So since our last meeting, two very important steps or events have occurred. One, late October, the Michigan Public Sector Public Service Commission, which will be charged with reviewing those projects that are under purview of PA 233, adopted their final rules of how the application process works, what the review process is, and further administratively interpreted and defined what essentially constitutes a local effective unit of government, as well as what can be considered for satisfactorily meeting the definition of a compatible renewable energy ordinance. And in doing so, they redefined by administrative action the definition of a local effective unit of government, as well as framed the definition that a ordinance can only be considered a compatible renewable energy ordinance so long as it only pertains to those items that are within section 226.8 of the law. That was a very stiff definition, as well as a very, in my mind, extraordinary step for an administrative authority to essentially define the intent of the statute or change the intent or definition of the statute that was passed by the law or by the legislature. As a result of those rules being adopted and set in place in late October and early November, there was a class action lawsuit filed with the Michigan Court of Appeals, led by Foster Swift and lead attorney Michael Holmier, with support from over 70 townships at the time of filing, and now by support via resolution, I believe to be over 200 townships.
Is Foster Smith a law firm?
They are. They're one of the largest municipal and private law firms in the state of Michigan. Very reputable, excellent firm. I can attest that I've worked with Mike Holmier in the past, and he is an extremely competent attorney. And he, through this class action, has challenged or is appealing the rules as adopted and imposed by the Michigan Public Service Commission on a couple of grounds. One, that the authority, the Public Service Commission, did not have the authority to either redefine or reclassify those items in the ordinance. One, the definition of a local effective unit of government. Two, the explicit limitation of what is considered a compatible renewable energy ordinance, and everything else is not compatible. Further, as a part of that, specifically relating to the CREO, I believe there is a deeper challenge here, and first I have to say that I agree with the lawsuit, that we need to have clarification, that there may have been an overstep of administrative authority, and the appeal is not asking to repeal the law. The appeal is asking for the court to intervene and say that the rules that were adopted inappropriately and above the authority afforded to that. So with that being clarified, I think the second part of that is when we look at the Public Act 234, which made amendment to the Zoning Enabling Act to reinforce the provisions of Public Act 233, the amendment did not specifically address those authorized tools within the Zoning Enabling Act. So, for example, we discussed tonight PUD, we discussed open space preservation. There are other tools that are available, such as transit-oriented development. They're all within the Zoning Enabling Act to give local jurisdictions the authority to use, but not a requirement to use. And by explicitly defining the CREO, the Compatible Renewable Energy Ordinance, to the extent that was done by the rules adopted, that essentially says that communities cannot adopt any stricter regulations than what is within the Act itself, nor if the community were to choose to impose, let's say, an overlay district, and say, you know what, we want to enforce an overlay district within areas of our township that provide clarity, guidance, and our community's desires with regards to regulating that specific land use. I believe the argument is that because the amendment to the Zoning Enabling Act through Public Act 234 did not specifically remove those powers or specifically amend those sections, that the appropriate challenges here is that absolutely the definition of a compatible renewable energy ordinance as adopted is at conflict with the Zoning Enabling Act itself. So, given that, I am now in the position that I am not recommending my clients to take any action or produce any ordinance based on the amount of time and effort that it takes to put those ordinances together, because we are going to have, at some point, clear definition from the Court of Appeals. What that clear definition is, I don't know. I can't predict. So I think it would be fiscally irresponsible for me as a consultant to charge you as my client on the creation of an ordinance that I have no clear understanding of what the outcome will be or what that ordinance could look like as a result of the court case. The last item that I have with regard to that is this idea that is being sort of promoted both from the Michigan Township Association as well as a number of other entities. The idea of one of the options was which I spoke to you about in September, of creating a workable ordinance, where the workable ordinance recognizes those items that are statutorily regulated and required, PA 233, but adds more regulations or guidelines for approval based on the community's desires for the community's land use goals.
All right,
This is not being challenged, to my knowledge, at this point.
okay.
But the fact of the matter is the statute as it exists today, PA 233, does not mention once a workable ordinance. Either you have a compatible renewable energy ordinance or you're not compatible. And so I am not certain that a future challenge will be made to define what is considered, again, the compatible ordinance versus not compatible, and in my mind, would possibly completely eliminate the possibility of having a workable ordinance because it's not once mentioned in the statute. So without a statutory amendment or a court ruling, I'm not comfortable with going through the motions with the township again to create an ordinance that I don't have confidence at this point is statutorily justified.
So if workable is not addressed in the actual legislation, where did that term come from? The previous administrative ruling by the Public Service Commission?
It was a term that was presented during the rules making in the public hearing process from the Michigan Public Service Commission, where a third option was presented that if the developer under statute right now believes that a community's ordinance is not a compatible ordinance, but it is acceptable to the developer to, instead of going to the state, continue the process of trying to get local approval, that's where the idea of workable came from. And the statute does state that a developer has the option, if a CREO is in place, then the process starts at the local municipality and finishes with the local municipality. If the municipality has a non-compatible ordinance, the developer has the option to start with the municipality, but if the developer finds that circumstances are unreasonable, then they go to the state. That's where the concept of workable came from. But the term workable ordinance, the definition, workable ordinance, and the authority of a workable ordinance are nowhere to be found in the statute. Now, if our township attorney disagrees, then I'm all ears. But that is, as a planner that is very involved with this, I am hesitant to ask the community to go through the process when, again, we need the court to give us guidance.
All right.
Since the appeal is happening now, I am recommending that we hold off, at least on the items related to those that would be under the responsibility of the Act 233.
All right,
What I would like to understand from the township is separate that completely. So put 233 completely aside, pretend for a moment that it doesn't exist. The next piece that I would like to understand is, does the planning commission wish to provide provisions for allowing site-specific alternative energy generation, whereas a business or a residential facility has the opportunity to have either wind or solar power within limits that specifically provide energy to that specific site. And then the next part of that is, do we want an ordinance that specifically prohibits or expressly prohibits anything that is either non-local site-specific alternative energy, but not regulated under PA 233. So it's everything that would be still considered utility scale generation, where the primary process or principle of the use is to put power into the grid, not a specific site on which the utility, the generation would serve as the principal use on that site. What do we want to do about that space between small scale accessory use and that space and everything else, between everything else being regulated by PA 233? Do we want to do anything? Do we want to do nothing? Going back to the item about the court case and the Supreme Court ruling, Desmond v. Charter Township of Littlefield, that if it's not specifically listed or identified in your ordinance, it's explicitly prohibited.
All right, Justin, I'll open it up to the board for discussion, to see what input we can give you.
Well, right off the bat, I would agree that as far as the large scale stuff, that I would move that we take no further action on compatible renewable energy ordinance as defined under PA 233 until the Court of Appeals process has worked itself out.
Does that include the battery energy storage system that we got a
Yes.
booklet on?
Yes.
It does. Public Act 233 provides guidance for solar facilities above 50 megawatt generating capacity, wind powered facilities above 100 megawatt capacity, and battery energy storage systems.
And batteries,
below 50
okay.
megawatt capacity.
So that's the large-scale facilities that we're going
Correct.
to see what's happening.
Good.
I'll second your motion, Joel.
Did you have a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't hear it.
My motion is that we take no further action on a compatible renewable energy ordinance as defined under PA 233 until the Court of Appeals has ruled.
Okay, give definition. Okay, and who's second?
You did.
Okay. I thought it was a discussion, I didn't catch that it was an ordinance, sorry about that. All right, let's have a roll call on that.
Chair Knopf,
Yes?
Vice Chair Benz,
Yes?
Secretary Lundy, yes, Linda Garrett,
Yes.
Jenny Peller,
Yes.
Joel King.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
So now we're on to the small scale stuff that we were speaking, that was the secondary topic. Do we have, so I have a question about that. So if someone decides they want to have solar city slap solar cells on their roofs, is that would fall underneath that? Because we don't address that specifically in our current zoning, does that mean that they would be not in compliance with our zoning law?
So, what I would like, potentially, yes. But I don't think, in most of the communities that I've worked with, I don't think there's ever been an intent to restrict private residences or businesses from utilizing alternative energy as an accessory, as long as it is specifically serving that principal use on that property. This is another law that is coming through the pipeline. One version of it is already passed, which explicitly prohibits homeowners associations, private homeowners associations, from excluding residences from utilizing or erecting alternative energy uses on their site or on their properties. The next step of that is going to be to ensure that it is recognized as a accessory use for the specific purpose of serving a specific site. If that is the feeling of the township, I think it's just important that we have some language that represents that to say, we are okay with you having solar systems on your roof or ground mounted systems within your rear yard or within a certain setback and where that's located, if the intent is not to prevent residences or businesses from having access to alternative energy generation. But I want to make sure that we separate it out as there is accessory generation at a very small scale, and then there is everything from between accessory and PHE 33. If we want to make sure that our residents and businesses, if the intent is to allow access to those alternative energy opportunities, then I would rather have language that clearly defines where it can be located and for what purpose.
So that's what you talk about, being site-specific, that's what you wanted input on?
Site specific, think about it as a residential house with a shed. We want to allow them to have a shed, we don't want them to not be able to have a shed.
Right.
We're very clear on where that shed can be and how big it can be.
Right.
So
Linda?
if the intent is for us to allow residences and businesses to do the same thing for alternative energy that is specific to that site, then I would just like some clarifying language. If we're comfortable with the ordinance as it stands, that's fine too. I would just like some direction.
Linda?
Do we currently have a wind energy ordinance?
We have a wind energy ordinance. We do not have a solar ordinance, and the provisions that are currently within the ordinance are not specific to small scale accessory. The current wind energy system ordinance, which is section 4.51, in my reading would currently be considered a non-compatible ordinance under Act 233.
So we need to rewrite wind energy ordinance, include other alternative energy like solar panels, if people have them in their yards, setback information, height information, fall information, turbines on roofs, and then do we need another ordinance that goes between if somebody were to have land that was in between the PA 23 and a small residential lot, they have like a small energy farm of some sort?
Correct. So that's the current wind energy ordinance. I'm not saying at this time that it needs to be repealed. I don't want the township to have to go through that process at the moment until the court case is settled. However, depending on the outcome of that court case and the determination that they make, the current ordinance as it is, a 4.51, would be considered non-compatible. So again, pushing all that aside and pretending that doesn't exist at the moment. If we're looking at just the local accessory scale, I would recommend that it is, if the township or the planning commission would like to move forward with that, with clarification, then I would recommend that it's clarified that it is across all zoning districts from residential to commercial to industrial. Because we don't want to, unless the township attorney feels otherwise, I guess I'm torn on this. If you want to limit to just residential, you probably could. I would be curious to understand the township attorney's position on if we allow for residential as site-specific accessory to the principal use, should businesses have the same opportunity as the residents?
Couldn't we look at that under a site plan and look at that for screening on your site plan review? It'd be a site alteration.
With equipment for screening, absolutely, but I still am not confident that we currently have a definition of these structures or uses as an accessory. So if a homeowner were to to support power generation to their property. I don't have the definitions or language now to establish where that may be, how it shall be screened, or if it's permitted, because right now it's not being within the ordinance, it's prohibited. So that's I guess the essence of my question is, do we want to change that? Do we want to define it? Do we want to establish the standards for where it's located, what the height restrictions are, the setback restrictions, or are we comfortable with our ordinance as it stands currently without reference to it?
I would think we need to add it. I mean, solar seems to be a popular thing that people put on their houses, so I think we should have something in our ordinance for guidance.
And something specific that states, if I put it on my house, I'm not sharing it with the neighbor, or I'm not selling it to the neighbor too. Something.
Well, we can't do that because the nature of the power grid is when you put a solar installation on your house, the way it's intended to work is that it provides an additional source of generation to the effect that if it creates enough generation for the use on the site, example in your house, then your house will be powered essentially from that generation. If the installation is generating more power than what's required to meet the needs of the house, then that excess generation has the ability to be rebated back to the property owner at a wholesale cost from the grid provider, whether it's Consumers Energy or DTE or otherwise.
So Michigan has a reverse metering law
What
then?
we is specified that the power can only be used for we can specify that the intent of the accessory alternative energy system is for the specific purpose of supporting the principal use. What we can't say is that the power can't go to any other use, because once the power's in the grid, it's infinity. It goes where it goes. We can't essentially say that I'm generating power on my roof. My neighbor, John Doe, needs additional power, so I'm sending a power cable over to him and providing him with power. The grid doesn't work that way. So we can stipulate that the intended purpose is to serve the energy generation requirements for the principal use on site. But we can't say where that energy generation cannot go, because we cannot delineate where that power goes once it's in the grid.
Hang on a minute, Justin. The clerk has a comment?
Yeah, I just had a quick question on that one. So if we're after for the resident to be able to supply for their own house, yes, we understand it can go to the grid. Who determines what is the proper amount for that house, so that, let's say if you own 10 acres, not every square inch of it is with the panels? Who determines, or how is it determined how many you can put in?
So the way it's determined is every principal use, whether it's an industrial facility, a residential facility, or otherwise, has a minimum load requirement to fully power the use. So for example, 2 years ago I had a representative come to my house to analyze my house to determine what size backup generator I would need should our power go out. It was determined that for my house, which is a 1,700 square foot house, needed somewhere between 16 and 20 kilowatts to operate. That is an estimate that is going to vary on each individual property. So what we have to do to define that, to respond to your question, Pauline, is if the intent of the system is to purely provide power or alternative generation specific to the principal use, then they can be considered accessory. If the intent is to provide generation with the specific intent of only feeding it back into the grid, that is a commercial non-accessory use. That's that gray area between accessory and PA 233. I think the way that we handle that is by using the definition of accessory use for the purpose of supporting the principal use, just like we do with a shed or other accessory structure or use on property. At any point in time, if the intent is to supplement our income by providing to the utility, then that is a commercial use, and I would recommend that be prohibited. I don't know what the number is, because each specific principal use has a different load requirement for its minimum capacity.
Okay, all right, thanks, Justin.
Does Michigan have a reverse metering law?
Not yet. They're working on it now. Well, at least, so the way it is now is that we as consumers have to buy our energy at a commercial retail price. The current law requires that, again, if there is a excess generation from a accessory residential or commercial installation, that the utility has to rebate the customer at a wholesale cost. So there's a significant disparity between what the wholesale cost of the energy is. I'm not sure what the current kilowatt hour is. I think it's maybe around 13 cents with consumers' energy, and the wholesale cost is around 4 cents or 5 cents. That's the existing law. I do know that there are laws that have been crafted that are going to be introduced in the very near term that would close that gap, but that's speculation at this point.
Okay.
I don't want to make ordinances based on speculation.
Anything else, Joe?
No, just that
Okay,
moving the reverse metering reimbursement rate closer to the commercial rate would incentivize people trying to come to the township to have larger and larger systems. I just wanted to know where we stood right now on the incentivized portion of that.
so we've had a lot of discussion here, but the primary question is, do we need new ordinance? Linda?
I think that somebody's putting solar panels on their private home, that I don't think that we need to regulate that. If they're putting solar accessory structures, siting them on their property, that we should look at regulating that in terms of like a shed, where is there in the rear yard, is there screening? You know, if they have a situation where they can only put them in the front yard, and we say they're in the backyard, then it could be a ZBA issue. I think the wind turbine, you know, there's height restrictions if you put them on a roof, but if you're siting it in your yard somewhere, that it should be regulated with falls and heights and things like that, but that's for a private residence. I think if it's on a commercial or industrial property, that we should look at that under a site plan review. I think anything beyond that, if somebody has some land that they want to maybe run a little small scale underneath the PA 22 and residential or industrial commercial property, that we should prohibit that, are my thoughts.
Any other comments? Are we we're probably not ready to put anything together in a motion for an ordinance
Just discussion?
discussion. Okay, we'll leave it at that. All right. Back to you, Justin.
So, aside from that, the only other item we had was F,
Right.
with private road Article 4, and specific to ensuring, by adding specific language, that if somebody does qualify for a private road, that they don't have the ability to put the private road on a neighbor's property line, that they have to at least recognize the neighbor's setback requirements under the ordinance. And again, I am comfortable with the language as proposed, with that, and if the, planning commission is okay with that, then again, I would say that I'm comfortable with this going for a public hearing.
Should the attorney look at that, draft?
And again, I would always put the asterisk that I would defer to the legal opinion if there is some reason otherwise that prevents us from doing that. But as far as the language stands, as presented, I don't see a conflict with the zoning anyway.
I just wanted to add, and I'm not sure, maybe I misunderstood, so I'm sorry if I did, but this provision was only going to affect 5A. It's not going to affect private road setback requirements. This is only going to affect those that are going to be for one parcel only. It does not affect the 60-foot requirement that's in the other portion of our ordinance.
Yeah, it says this will, if the private road will serve a single parcel or building site.
Correct. So it's only going to affect that circumstance where they come in and do a deed restriction and they never really put the road up to standards. It remains a driveway. So this is to help out residents who are just gonna split their property one time. So they don't have to have the 60-foot setback. They're just gonna go by regular setback designations. Not for all private roads, just this.
So difference between private road and driveway?
When they split front to back, they actually have to legally describe a private road. It's a private road easement. It's just not brought up to standards. If they do deed restrict that, it will never be split again. So it's actually on paper shows a private road so that they get their frontage.
Is there width requirement?
60.
The
That
width?
hasn't changed, 60.
Okay. So the attorney doesn't need to look at this?
The attorney does. I just want to make sure that everybody understood that it only is for this section and none of the rest of the private road ordinance.
I'll make a motion to add the private road item, Article 4, Section 5A, for legal review.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please. Jennifer?
Joel King,
Aye.
Jenny Allard,
Yes.
Linda Garrett,
Yes.
Secretary Lundy, aye. Vice Chair Benz,
Yes.
Chair Eric Sapp.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right. 2G, Planning Commission bylaws. That's something that the clerk and I have looked at. You saw what we came up with here in the packet. Everybody agree with this? It talks a little bit about the duties of the secretary. Jennifer, is that something you feel comfortable with, that portion?
I reviewed it and I am comfortable with it.
Then we'll, yeah, okay.
If you ever want the minutes back, just let us know. I read it.
All right. Any other comments on the bylaws? Okay, well, I think we need a motion then to approve as presented.
Legal.
I'm sorry?
It needs to be reviewed by
Yeah,
legal.
and then move on to legal. Yeah, recommended, the motion to recommend to go to legal.
So all this is going to be,
Correct.
I move that we approve the draft. as written, then go on to legal then.
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, Jennifer.
Okay.
What are your duties here?
Joel King,
Aye.
Jenny Aller,
Yes.
Linda Garrick,
Yes.
Secretary Lundy, yes. Vice Chair Benz,
Yes.
Chair Harrison.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving right along, public forum. Don't see too much public out there, so. Next is commissioners' reports. Anything from the board, Linda, or? Okay.
It's been so long, I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
Then there's only adjournment.
All right, commissioners' report. And I sit on the CBA. The latest thing that we've been getting involved in is septic systems around the lake. So that's something that's, they're all going to these sophisticated engineering systems. It's almost like a mini sewage treatment center. So they're popping up more and more because, you know, the systems are failing, no room to put a regular system in. And, they're quite complex, but they do the job. So, we even had a couple of members on the CBA. We had a meeting with the Oakland County Health Department just to kind of get their input, what this is all about. We feel pretty comfortable on these new systems. The water that comes out of the system is actually cleaner than the lake. Anyway, so much for that. I guess we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion. Adjourn.
Okay, everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, let me go home.